Blog Talk Radio.
Here at ACO Radio, American Communications Online, or any affiliated stations or websites are not responsible for what guest hosts or call-ins may say. All programming is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only.
Hello, world. This is TJ Morris, and you're listening to American Communications Online. And my company, or my brand, or channel, whatever you want to say, wherever you're pulling into Blog Talk or Spotify or wherever, is TJ Morris ET Radio. I've been sporting that since 2012 with Janet Carroll Lessin, and she has Aquarian Radio in Hawaii, and we're going to work on Saturdays in Paranormal with Ronnie Dawson out of Texas. So I'm going to let each one of them introduce themselves. I'm in the panhandle of Gulf Breeze, Florida, and I guess I'm coming in okay. I'm trying to call in direct, which I don't like to do, into the studio on my computer. But I was just talking to Ronnie and Janet, so we'll see how this goes. So, Ronnie, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us where you're calling in from, if you don't mind.
Okay, thank you, Janet. Yes, my name is Ronnie Dawson. I'm a UFO alien contactee experiencer, and tonight we've started a paranormal show here called You Ain't Gonna Believe This, and we're gonna go deep into the paranormal, and we're gonna talk about everything from ghosts to Bigfoots and I've been asking around and getting some paranormal stories to share, real deal paranormal stories that actually happened to people, and some of them can't share them because of where they worked, but I can't share them without using their names and stuff. So I've got some good stuff to share tonight, and I think you'll really enjoy it. And like I said, I've seen enough stuff myself to know that there's more to this world than we could ever imagine, and we're going to talk about some of that here in the next few weeks on Saturday. It should usually be at 7 p.m. Sometimes by chance it may happen at 3 p.m., but usually 7 p.m. Central Time is the time I'm trying to get on here.
All right, thanks, Ronnie. Yeah, Janet, can you hear me? Do you want to introduce yourself in Hawaii?
Yeah, I'm the co-host, Janet Carroll Lessin, and not the co-host. I'm just tuning in today. This is going to be Ronnie's going to be the host, and then he'll have whoever he wants on. This, I guess if I'm understanding this correct, a new show called You Ain't Gonna Believe This. It's paranormal based. It'll be on. I guess you're going to want people to send you stories also, right, Ronnie? So are you going to have like an email where people can send you their stories so you can report them on the show?
Yeah, they can. I mean, it's okay if people call in, or otherwise I'm trying to get some people to come online, but they're kind of timid and scared. But they told me that they didn't mind me sharing their stories, so I could share it from a third person's perspective.
Well, it's a great idea. I love it. And if you could send me a description of your show, Ronnie, I'll put it up on my site, and it'll be available for people to read the description and the. I guess, TJ, you're going to facilitate putting up the show link each week. Are you going to be co-hosting with Ronnie, or are you going to be? How are you going to be doing this?
Well, I haven't. We're just getting started. I wanted to do a series for him, so I have it on American Communication Online as the company. TJ Morris ET Radio is where we're broadcasting from. So, Janet, I don't know if you can syndicate on yours or just grab it.
Well, I won't be able to do this every Saturday. I can tune in now and again. I'm just I have a lot of things going here. I have a farm in Maui, and I have some organizational things. Like today, I have a worker, and they haven't checked back in with me, so I might have to leave even this show. But I'm here to support you, and to help this process. But we're trying to get food in here because of COVID and the coronavirus. We're trying to get more self-sufficient. We're over here in Maui. We've got the perfect growing climate, but I'm in the middle of organizing people so we can, get everything in place here. But, I can, now and again, I'll let you know week by week if it's okay that I can tune in. And like I said, I may have to go because I have workers here. I didn't know this was going to happen. And they might text me and I'll have to go take care of whatever's going on. But, I think it's a great idea. I would recommend you Ronnie or TJ would have a receiving place for all the stories that you would end up getting, Ronnie, so you can sort through. I mean, imagine you're going to get a lot of people. If they can share their stories anonymously, they're going to want to be able to do that. So you want to think about it, then sometime during the course of this show, tell people how they can, email their stories to you. Have you thought about that, Ronnie? Where do you want them to send their stories?
Yeah, they can send their stories to RonnieDawson11@gmail.com, and so RonnieDawson11@gmail.com. You can send your story in there.
Hey, let me slow that down a little bit, Ronnie. You said that fast, okay? Let's slow it down.
Okay.
Because people are probably trying to write it down. One more time, but slow it down and spell it out.
Yeah, it's RonnieDawson11@gmail.com. RonnieDawson11@gmail.com. And you can send your stories in there, and we'll get them on for you. And we'll keep you anonymous if you choose to be.
What if they want to tell their story? Are you going to be allowing that? They could send their information. They could say, I'd like to be on, or I'd like to just read my story.
Right, yeah. You can come on and tell it if you'd want to do it that way, or we can just share it if you give us permission to do so.
Okay, it sounds great. I'm excited for you. It sounds like a great idea.
He does pretty good by himself. I could just produce it for him, but I'll be here. Paranormal's my thing. As long as my computers hold out and my phones, folks, I've been here. Me and Janet have been doing this. It'll be 8 years, Ronnie, next month, June 6th. Janet and I have been
8-year anniversary.
Archiving radio shows that long, and I've paid at least $40 a month every month for Blog Talk, and so is Janet. So Janet keeps hers up, I keep mine up, but I put her on here and told her about it. So I figured if she wants to syndicate it, she can too. So I think it's a good idea too, Ronnie. And you told yours, so it's on here. So and then we sort of caught up people, but however you want to do it, Ronnie, because I've got UAP Associates, folks, UAP .associates. I'm going to be building that domain name up. And then I have UFO Secret Space, and a big group over there on Facebook, and I think Ronnie's in that, and Janet. Ronnie, are you in our UFO Secret Space Facebook group? I've got a domain name.
That's a good question. I'm in so many groups, man. I don't even know.
Well, we may do I think we're going to do a UAP Associates for Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena Associates, because I talk to a lot of people that are on my psychic shows, and they love me to do readings, but a lot of them don't follow the UFO stuff. So, and Janet does a lot on Aquarian, but she and I pretty much stuck with just about everything. But I think Janet and I sort of went around ET contactees and Stargate to the Cosmos events. And we were going to blend UFO events and our psychic events together. And she did the last one, didn't you, Janet? So Stargate to the Cosmos 2018. So we'll let you know.
I'm done traveling. I'm done traveling for a while until, things get corrected in our economy, and it looks like it might be a while. So I think it's really smart to do things online, to do shows like this, maybe even some webinars. But I think this is a great public service to get out these stories. And I want to pass the mic to Ronnie here, because the more you normalize the paranormal events in the world, and you have a lot of like, me too, I saw ghosts, me too, this happened, then the more the more stories we'll start getting, because more people will be comfortable about telling their tales. So you said you had a couple good stories. You want to start out and tell us one, and then maybe TJ and I, you could be the interviewer, and TJ and I can tell a story. I'm wanting to get started into the meat of this, because any time now my workers are going to text me. I'm going to have to get off. So, Ronnie, would you like to start with a story?
Sure. Yeah, I was wanting to share my first ghost story. It was actually I I was a kid, probably 8 years old, and the grandmother I loved very dearly and was very sick, and she had gotten put into the hospital, and she was in bad shape, and I was really heartbroken because she was in the hospital, basically dying of some kind of flu, and I wasn't very old, 8, 9 years old, and anyway, I know that I was fixing to, they were talking about she was well enough that she could start having visitors. And I was getting ready the next day to go see her at the hospital, and that night something tapped me and woke me up, and it was my grandmother standing over my bed, and she told me, she said, look, Ronnie, I'm gonna die, and I look terrible up there, and she said, I don't want you to go up there and see me like that, and she said, I just looked awful, and she said, and I'm not talking right, and I'm just acting crazy, and she goes, I just want to let you know that I love you, and I'm going to see you again, but I'm going to die, and I don't want you to see me like that. She said, so please don't go up there. And then she turned, and I remember I could see through her. She was like a glowing mist, and she walked right into my closet. I remember getting up out of bed, and I looked in the closet, and there wasn't nothing in there but clothes. And I woke up the next morning, and I told my parents, I said, look, I said, Granny came and seen me last night, and she told me not to go to the hospital and see her like that. She said she was going to die, and she didn't want me to remember her like that. And they said, well, no, the doctors told us she's getting better. She's going to be all right, you know. And I said, well, you know, I don't want to go up there. Well, they went up there, and she had a sudden turn for the worse, and she ended up dying. And my parents just kind of freaked out, like, oh my God, you know, so you reckon that could be real? But you know, she looked certainly real. I could see right through her, but she was like a glowing mist. And when she walked in the closet, I actually got out of bed and walked over to the closet, and I looked in there, and there was nothing in there but clothes. It was just like, you know, it was like she hadn't died in the hospital yet, but yet it was like her life force or essence or whatever had left her body and came and visited me at my home. So, you know, that was my first experience with a ghost, you know, and really I didn't see any other ghosts for quite a while, but I was in the hospital at one point, and there was an old man that my dad and another buddy of his used to go out there, and they'd go drinking. They'd take me with them, and they'd go basically deer poaching off where this old man lived, and I mean, he lived way out in the middle of nowhere. And they would stop and they would drink beer with the old man, and then he would let us go on his property and shoot deer and stuff. And I was in the hospital and getting a surgery done, and they put me in a room with this, and my dad didn't know the old guy was in the hospital, but he remembered the old guy. He goes, hey, you remember? He goes, remember us? He goes, what are you doing in here? And he told him, he said that somebody had attacked him, or he thought, or maybe he had fell and hit his head or something, but he was in the hospital. And my dad had a nice conversation with him, and he ended up putting him in the nursing home, and he died there about 2 weeks later in that nursing home. Well, my dad and his friend named Billy Jack, they went out to go deer hunting out there on his old place. And they went out there, and my dad, you know, he's not one of those people that really believes in ghosts and stuff, but it was late in the afternoon. It wasn't even dark, and they were cruising into the property. And when they went by his old house at the back of the pasture, there was the old man sitting on his front porch in his rocking chair looking at them. And he said both of them just shut up, and they didn't say a word to one another, and they just drove by the house. He said they were scared to stop. They just drove by the house, and the old man was in the rocking chair looking at them. And he just kept looking at them, and as they drove by, my dad said he looked at them like, well, you guys ain't going to stop, you know, like you always do. And he just looked at them like, why aren't you stopping? And then when they got by the house, they looked at each other. He goes, did you see that? And he goes, I sure did. He said, I swear he looked at us like he was almost pissed off at us that we didn't stop, you know. And he said, well, you know, he died, you know, like 2 weeks ago. And he said, I don't know. He said, I don't know what to do. He goes, but I saw it. You saw it. And they went in there and they went about looking for their deer. They came back by the old house. And he said, you know, we got to stop. We got to go in there. And if nothing else, we'll take a beer in there, open it up, and leave it. You know, and it was creepy. My dad said he went in there and said, man, he was cold chills are running up his back after seeing all that. And they said they left the beer opened for the old man. And they said they never saw hide nor hair of him when they went by the house or when they were in the house. And he said they left, and he said, man, it was scary as heck, doing that. And he said, but both of them seen him. Said he was sitting there as plain as daylight staring at them when they drove by that house. And that's the kind of stories that, and those guys, when my dad came home, he was white as a sheet, You could tell that he had seen something really weird. And, they tell that story for a long time, and they never saw him again, So whether he died and made his way back to his house or how, what he did, I don't know. But it was just one of the ghost stories that they talk about around here, and I enjoy sharing it with people that normally wouldn't hear it. That's the kind of stuff
that's very interesting. That's very interesting. We have stories like that around here. But let me get back to your grandma that died. And so she's contacting you when she's in that in-between state, telling you not to come up and see her.
Right.
So I had a similar experience. I wonder, because TJ's had loved ones pass in the last couple of years or a few years, but when my mother died, she came and took me actually to the house where I was raised in, and she literally was born in that house. And the whole house was haunted. So she took me by my arm, and she's running me around. Now I'm in my astral body, and she's dead. So I guess that must be the same dimension. And she'd take me around the house, and she's saying, look, there's no more ghosts here. She said, I was the reason why they were coming, and when I died, now the house is clear. And so she was showing me there's all these ghosts here. And she says, but I've held you here long enough now. And so she takes me down the steps, down the hallway to the front door. And she says, you have to go because if I keep you here too long, it's going to be harmful to you. And she literally pushed me through the front door and kind of kicked me. And I came all the way back here to Maui. And I popped back in my body. My astral body joined my physical body. And I folded upright and went, wow. It was like really trippy. So anyway, I would just add to that. TJ, do you have any stories about, you've had Tom come to you, right? And your sister,
yeah.
Your sister-in-law?
I've had a lot of people come to me, but...
tell us who came to you when they died.
Well, Tom, after he passed, I saw him on his deathbed passing back into a little baby. When he was, he was passing, he knew if he went to the hospital, he was going to pass. And we had him in ICU. Wasn't nothing wrong with him, except he had his leg cut off, had diabetes. But they wanted him to go he had a spot on his lung. So the VA told him to go in and get fixed. So I thought it was sort of spooky. He knew this time if he went in, he wasn't coming back because he was in a wheelchair on wheels and he'd gone down to his sister's to eat. And VA called me, so I took him there, and they had a doctor stick something in his lung. And, of course, for some reason, we didn't know because we don't know. We trust the hospital and the doctors, but somehow Tom knew he was going to die, and he did. But part of him left through the window. I watched it. I watched him look up and smile at somebody. So that made me wonder if we don't all split up, because a lot of the things that we study in cosmology and metaphysics is the fact that your body can split up. And I have past lives and memories of being, we just say a lot of people know their past lives. So, we've been around for billions of years. So I relate to some of those because I have memories, and I put it on YouTube too about some of my lives. But watching him split up that way, later on, he comes to me, and I did a virtual reality with him in St. Louis he came to me. It's like a lucid dream, but you get up and walk out of that. So I strongly suggest that we don't know really what's going on with our spirit selves. And so to make a long story short, because we got it all day, but I just soon produce, but talking's okay too, I guess. I like Janet to involve my people now. I figured out after 8 years, and I can just sit back and listen and produce. But I saw him on a spaceship. I'm not kidding, folks. I'd gone into a dream, so I know I'd laid down and gone to sleep. Then I got up out of a virtual lucid dream, and I'm going to get with some of these neuroscientists and stuff about this because I've asked some people to put me under. But seeing your husband die, over. But we went to St. Louis. Now, you can say, how does a ghost tell you where you're at? I don't know, folks. But we were in St. Louis, and this big ship came down, and he was on it, and I was on it. And it was like this, it was sort of like a Star Trek convention because it was like a big hotel, motel, how to say, a big convention like the Astro Center or something. But it was huge inside. And they had, I remember sort of a big, wide hall like you would see in an air, like maybe Atlanta, you know, where they have these things you stand on and go along. They're not escalators, they're walkways that move. And people were holding plates around towards the rest. It was like where you eat. But I saw my husband walk to another area, and then there was other people I knew. Now, I don't know how he took me on a spacecraft out of my dream into a lucid dream, into a reality that I swear is as real as me talking to you right now. So I'm really looking at all that. It's really got me interested and curious in the mind, the soul, and the body, but also how conscious works in different dimensions and stuff. It came to me again, but I'll stop right there for now because we're just going to get used to working with Ronnie because I want this to be Ronnie's show, and I'll produce it, market it, promote it, and Janet's good at syndicating and helping put up pretty pictures and market and promote. But I'm going to give it back to Ronnie. So, Ronnie, I've got other stuff, but later on Janet likes to break stuff apart or what she calls unpack stories too. So she may like to help you from time to time on here, you know, as long as she's going to syndicate it. But I'm going to go back to you, Ronnie. This is your idea.
Okay. Thank you. That's a wild story, you know. It makes you... And some of the stuff I've seen lately, you know, I seen the other day, they pulled my conscious out of my sleeping body and put me in a clone body on another planet, you know. So our consciousness, you know, you never know if you're, you know, up to the point now where you never know if it's really a dream or if they're running a simulation on you. So even now, I'm more confused now than ever because before, when I left my body, I knew it, and when I returned, I knew it. But this last time, they just pulled me out, and then the first thing I knew, I arrived somewhere else in a different body. And man, it was a weird experience. And the first thing that happened, for 30 seconds, I was drunk. I couldn't stand up. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't make my arms work or my legs work. And she said it takes a little while for your synapses to align. And after about 30 seconds, everything started working normally. But there for about the first 30 seconds, man, it was horrible. It was a nightmare being in that. But yeah, then I realized I'm in a body looks just like mine. So yeah, man, there's no telling when you're that consciousness. You know, there's so many. They could take us and put us back, and God only knows how many simulations they've ran on us that we thought were dreams. I completely understand how, you know, the ET and the whole consciousness thing could all be rolled in one big ball of wax, you know. But I have another story when I was a kid. We have this old lake outside of town out here. It's called Hageman Lake, and it's right here in town. It's walking distance for kids. And when I was young, I used to walk down there. And old Miss Hageman, she was like one of the richer families in town, and I mean, she's one of those old type women who looked down her nose at you. She thought we were low lives, and she didn't like me or my sister hanging around her grandkids. You know, she always held the attitude that they were a little better than everybody else, and she didn't like them playing with this riffraff. and I remember Miss Hageman, you know. Her grandkids loved me and I loved them, and we were, you know, great friends. But Miss Hageman was determined, you know, not to let me be friends with these kids. You know, she'd always If she caught them playing with me, she would come down and interrupt us and send them up to their rooms or send them to dinner and send me home, So Miss Hageman she did not like me at all. And one time the kids let me into her. She's got a big staircase in this old house, and it's almost like a ballroom. And when you first walk in the house, there's a big winding staircase going up to the second floor. And I walked in there with muddy shoes, and oh my God, she come completely unglued on them marble floors. Me walking around with them muddy shoes on as a kid, and muddy tennis shoes. Man, she was mad. And I remember she ran me off that day, and she didn't want me coming back around there. But it was years later, and I was a teenager walking around, and me and a friend had went fishing, and he lived the opposite direction. We had finished up our little fishing trip, and he went to his house, and I was walking back into town, back to my grandmother's place, and I had my fishing pole with me, and I walked by the old Hageman place, and I know that there wasn't nobody lived there anymore. And so I thought, well, I want to look in. I went up there and I looked in the window, and the old house was immaculate, but it was old and falling apart. Nobody had lived in it. And I remember I thought, well, I want to go in here and look around, So I figured the door would be locked. So I tried the door, and the door opened up. And I thought, oh, my goodness, look, it's open. I looked around. There's no furniture or anything in the place. And I walked in that thing. I didn't get about 3 steps in there. And all of a sudden, coming down that stairwell was old lady Hageman. And man, she said, "I'll dare you come in here again with my shoes." And she was coming down that stairway at me. And man, I ran out that door, and I slammed that door, and I took off running with my fishing pole and tackle box. And I thought, oh my God, she's going to be on the phone with my grandmother. So when I got home, I told my grandmother. I said, went by the old Hageman place and said, I decided I wanted to go in there and look around. I said there was no furniture. I didn't figure anybody lived there because there wasn't any furniture in it. And I said I walked in there, and I said, Miss Hageman caught me in there, and I said, boy, she come down the stairway yelling at me, And I said, I was surprised she hadn't called you. And my grandma said, well, she's dead. She died. And I said, what? She goes, yeah, she's been dead for over a year. And she goes, yeah, they moved away about 5 years ago, and she's been dead, for quite a while now. I said, I swear, Granny, she came down that stairway mad as hell at me and ran me out of there. And she said, well, I don't know, maybe in her ghost or something, but she said, yeah, I know for a fact the old woman is dead. She said, nobody's staying there. And I said, well, she's just as mad as she ever was, ever what she was. And she'd come down there and run me out again. I mean, that'd be a good ghost adventure if they ever come to my neck of the woods. To take them over there, all I have to do is walk in there with muddy feet on it, and Miss Hageman, I guarantee, will show up. To this day, probably run me out of there. And but it's just so many different stories like that around here. And I've got another good one too. My sister was an ER nurse. She can't tell the story herself because she'd get in trouble, but she could tell me they were working on a patient in the emergency room, and they lost him, and they couldn't save him, and he died. And they were getting him ready for transport. They were taking everything off of him. And my sister said, "Man, she said her and another nurse sat right there, and she said this thing." She said this thing came up out of this guy's dead body, and she said it had a human figure to it. And she said both her and the other nurse seen it, and she said we just immediately just backed up. She said I backed up till I hit the wall, and the other gal backed up until she hit a table or something. And she said we just couldn't back up any further. And she said this thing raised up out of this old man that had just passed. And she said, she goes, and it wasn't human. She said it looked like a demon. She said this thing crawled up out of him, and it gave them a dirty look, and it walked to the doorway. And before it walked out of the doorway, it stopped, and it looked back at them, and then she said it growled at them. They could hear it like growl at them before it walked down the hallway. And she goes, man, I don't know to this day if that man had a demon in him or what was going on with that. She said, I've seen many people pass, but I've never seen anything like that. You know, even Dr. Stephen Greer said that he had an encounter like that after somebody had died. It wrecked the operating room that they were in. You know, so I don't know what was in it. But
well,
she said
we were talking about that on our show yesterday about some people get possessed and they have to have an exorcism. So maybe that she encountered was, you know, an accounting of somebody who had been possessed, and I guess the possessor, the demon or whatever, got pissed off because his host died, so now he didn't have a place to be. That's fascinating.
And she said they were right there at work in ER and seen it. Both of them saw the same thing, you know.
Mhm.
And she could say it was terrifying, you know. She said, man, it just scared the crap out of them. You know, either one of them had never seen anything like that before. And this thing just stared at them.
I wonder how many people have seen things like that and are afraid to report them because they don't want to, like your sister can't do that because that's her job, right? And she could lose her job. So.
Yeah, she can't say anything about who she's seen or what she's seen or anything like that. So, you know, but I can talk about it. I can talk about it. But she can't.
Right. But she can't. Well, that's why you're going to do a service for everybody who's got stories like that. Now, it'd be great for you to collect them and maybe make a book out of this. I'm sure in the next year or two you'll have enough stories to make a book. So I highly recommend you do that. Sounds great.
Well, you know, so many stories out there. So many people have them, and you know, a lot of people don't. Well, they'll talk about them, but you know, I understand. You know, people don't believe them, so they don't say a whole lot about it. You know, and you know, but, you know, a lot of times when your loved ones die, you do see something, you know, because me and my wife, I lost actually she was my third wife, and we had communicated, like, you know, hey, if I die before you, I'm going to come back and let you know. I'm going to do something so that you'll know that I'm on the other side and you do the same. And we had this agreement, right? But it's kind of scary after it really happens, and my wife died in my bedroom floor. Her jugular veins burst in her esophagus during a seizure, and she bled to death right there in my bedroom floor. 36 years old.
Oh.
So I had to live through that. You know, I had to live through this, and you know, I had to clean up the blood on the floor and everything else. You know, so and I was wondering, you know, because we had this agreement, you know, and I went a month without seeing or hearing anything, and then one night. She was real bad about when she wanted to talk to me. She would pinch me on the inside of the thigh, and it would hurt like all get out. And it would just wake me up to have a conversation. It was the oddest way of waking somebody up for a conversation. I hated it. All of a sudden, I was laying in bed, and I really had to come to terms with being able to sleep in the same room that she had died in, you know. And I made myself do it because I'm one of those kind of guys that's, you know, if you're you know, fearful of something, conquer your fear. Face your fear. So whether I like it or not, I made myself do it, you know. And so I slept in this bedroom, and it was nothing, you know, for 30 days. Then all of a sudden, I felt this pinch on my inner thigh, and I thought, my goodness, you know, it felt just. I almost woke up expecting her to be in the bed, you know, and but nothing. But the next day, broad daylight, I was off. I was laying on the sofa watching TV with my cat. And it's in broad daylight, and in the middle of the floor, this rainbow started. It was like this rainbow started spinning and changing colors right in the center of my living room floor, and I'm watching it, and the cat, I could see him watching it too. And I was going, my God, what is that? You know, and I looked, I couldn't find anything from the window or anything where a light like that would be coming. And it kept getting wilder and wider and wider, you know, and then it just stopped. And I thought, you know, that has to. It was the day after the night that she pinched me on the thigh. So I'm like, okay, that has got to be my wife trying to tell me that she's back. You know, has to be. And the next morning I got up to go to work, and I had every light on the house off, and I closed the door, and I had my lunch pail and my coffee thermos, and I turned around and pulled the door shut, and underneath my door, as I pulled the door shut, I seen a light shine underneath the door, it was like a door inside the house opening and closing, and a light coming from it. There wasn't no furnace or anything like that could come on. There was no excuse for what this light. It was very weird looking light. Shined underneath the doorway for a second and then closed again, and it went completely back to dark. And I was like, yeah, there's something going on. That's like a doorway, like Barbara was waiting on me to leave and then decided to come home and check the place out or something, I guess, after I left. Very strange. But, it's stuff like that makes you wonder, there's got to be more to it than just like a candle blowing out. There's more to your afterlife than you could ever imagine. So
right.
That's some of the first you think,
Well, I'll share one. That was fascinating, actually. So she may still come. She probably took a while to figure out how to do that. I think when you're dead, you don't always know how to do everything. So they learn how to communicate with the living. But I had one when I was growing up. My house was haunted, and my parents liked to go to church every Sunday, and I was required to go to Sunday school, but then I didn't have to go to the formal church part. And I only lived 2.5 blocks away from the church, so I just walked home. And I liked to watch the Sunday morning comics. It was in Pittsburgh, and they had a bunch of really good comics. One of them was H.R. Puss and stuff. So I would be sitting in the big overstuffed chair looking at the television, and behind me was a doorway going into the dining room, and around the corner was the staircase going upstairs. And I would feel something like watching me. And I turned around, and there's a head. This is in broad daylight, and this disembodied head was floating there. And it was an old man with a mustache and a beard, and he was had this silly grin on his face, kind of mischievous. And at first, I'd see that and scream, and I'd duck down. But I was conflicted. I didn't want to have to go to church and stay there because I really got bored in the service, right? And so I had to face my fears. Like I said, you have to face your fears. So and it was my house. There was nowhere to go. Either I come home or I ended out in the street. So I came home, and eventually I got to the point where I got angry. My anger, I channeled my anger, and I would see that thing, and he would duck behind the thing. So he would duck behind the doorway, and so I eventually got brave enough, and I would say, "You son of a bitch," and I ran and followed it, and it went all the way upstairs. And I didn't follow it upstairs, but it went all the way upstairs, and it ducked to the left. Now, to the left at the top of the stairs was a second stairwell that went from the back bedroom in the top at the end of the stairs that you could see into the back bedroom up there, down to the kitchen. So there's an old farmhouse from the 1840s, and it had two stairwells that kind of connected, wrapped around each other internally in the middle of the house. So I saw him for years and years and years and years. And eventually, when I was in my late 30s, just like we're doing now, I started sharing some ghost stories with my brother and sister. And so, lo and behold, they had seen him as well. So you may think you're the only one, and I'm crazy or something. But then you find out, oh, my God, you saw him too. So I'm going to pass the talking stick back to one of you two.
Awesome. That's great. There's this house I live here in Rangeville, Texas is it's kind of weird because it's like one of the older houses in town, and then they've added onto it, and then they got added onto a third time. Then I've actually added a bedroom onto it, so it's been added onto like 4 times. So the original house is actually very small, and back in those days it was. I mean, it wasn't like it was a bedroom, a small living room, a kitchen, and that was it. And I mean, and anyway, we know for a fact there was an old woman, and they told us that there was an old woman that had died. She was sick and there wasn't anything they could do for her. They put a hospital bed in the living room over here, and she laid in the bed and died, looking out of the window at the street. And they said she was the nicest old woman you'd ever meet. And so we're always joking, you know. Well, we had this psychic lady come over, and she said, "Man, you know, I'm picking up on this. There's an old woman here, and she lived here a long time," and we were like amazed, you know, like, yeah, we know exactly who you're talking about. and then we told her, she goes right in my area where I'm at, you know, something strange, you know, something happened with her, and I'm going, yeah. I said, okay, right there where you're sitting is where she supposedly died, looking out of that window. And she goes, oh. She said, I can feel her, you know. And she said she likes you guys. I said, I get the sense that she likes you guys. And she said, except your daughter. And we have, I don't know, she was probably a 15-year-old daughter that lives here. And she goes, she doesn't care much for her. And my daughter's kind of cocky, and she was sitting there, and she goes, well, I don't care much for her, you know. And she said, well, screw that old bitch. And when she said that, there was 6 of us sitting here watching. She was sitting there on a coffee table with her legs crossed. And I kid you not, she got shoved so hard across the living room floor with all 6 of us watching. Oh, my God. She hit the floor and slid. She hit the floor and probably slid 5 or 6 feet. It was like she got, you know, you could tell that she got, it was like it's like a poltergeist. Yeah, that's like a poltergeist. It's like when you see that kind of physical activity, you know, she got shoved across the living room floor, you know, and slid across the floor. You know, and there was 6 of us sitting there watching it, and we were going, there's no possible way that she could have just fell. And you could tell by the way she was sitting there, she didn't fall. It was like she was purposely shoved violently.
Right. Oh, well, she didn't get hurt, did she?
No, she wasn't hurt, but we were like, well, you better watch what you say, you know. Yeah, you better watch it.
You might piss off a ghost.
Yeah. And
well, I have a follow-up story for my disembodied head, which is kind of, it's interesting when you get proof for correlations. So that was, I was a young, you know, adolescent when all those things were happening. I was still watching cartoons. So fast forward to my teenage years, when I was about 13, I'd say, and I had my friends one day. We were hanging out. My parents always disappeared. I don't know. They kind of trusted me. I was the youngest of 3, but I was very mature, so I could be alone in the house, and I didn't have to, you know, have a babysitter or somebody watching me. And this was the 60s. It was pretty big. So they left, and I had a bunch of my friends come over, and I always wanted proof, so I said, let's have a seance. Now, Larry was the 7th son of the 7th son type of thing. He said, I've been told I have these abilities, so let's do this. So we darkened the room, put a little candle in the middle. There was a bunch of teenagers who were sitting in a circle. And he has a system where he puts a pencil or writing utensil in his left hand with a piece of paper. And then he closes his eyes, and then the ghost or entity will write through his left hand, his non-dominant hand. So we're doing this technique, and he's saying things. So I guess the entity is speaking to him, and he's translating to us. And then he's writing, and then it's like, okay, let's turn the lights up so we can see that his hand is moving, but there's not enough light to see what's going on the paper, right? So what happens to the wrong side? And we put the lights on, and lo and behold, and I hadn't told anybody about the disembodied head, right? There's the guy, and he's got the beard and the mustache, and he said, oh yeah, I remember this guy. He said, it there's someone here. It's a male. What do you want? Well, I'm the builder of this house. Now, this house was built in 1840 in Pennsylvania. It was the original farmhouse, and he had lived in the house through the Civil War. So anyway, there we are, looking at a drawing of this disembodied head that I had seen for years when I was sitting at home, watching cartoons. So that was an interesting correlation. Oh, and then one more thing. So Larry, now his mother was from the hills of the Carolinas. I forget if it was North Carolina or South Carolina. So she's kind of like a country hillbilly. There's a bunch of, I don't know what they came over in the 16th, 17th, 1800s. They're kind of back hills, hillbilly, West Virginia and Virginia. So, she kind of is very interesting character. She's very animated, and she speaks in a twang, right? And so she's relating to us about how. Well, I went to Larry's house, and it's been a mean ghost story, right? And she's telling us how when she was a kid, they were in a wagon, horse-drawn wagon, and it was around Halloween time, and they were going on, in the autumn, they were going on a what did they used to do? Like little dances and stuff, and they would do some harvest, kind of like, what was that called? Remember that series where the guy, Sadie Hawkins Day, right? Sadie Hawkins.
We did it in Tennessee. We'd have go out at some big house and have a ride with hay in it and take people down the road. And I'd actually do psychic readings, Janet, at Halloween parties. And every year for about 5 years when me and Tom would go up where they made it was a secret where they made white lightning. But that's one of my parts of my lives. But I know what you're talking about. But probably Ronnie does too. But this was up in the hills of Tennessee. And I lived right there in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So we'd go up to friends of ours that made white lightning up there on the trail up to North Carolina. But, yeah, we can tell all kind of stories like that, and the UFO stories. I want to tell some of those too. But keep going, Janet. But, yeah, Halloween stories that could be part of this, Ronnie, and our get-together.
Yeah.
I'd like to meet you, so I hope we can. I don't know if Halloween's the best time, but once in a while, I hopes to meet y'all. Oh, Janet, also the Roswell stories that go in, because Ronnie goes to the Roswell thing. So on the hour, we'll talk about that. I want him to talk about his adventure in Roswell, because I've been there too. All right, I'm on mute. Go ahead, Janet.
Okay, let me just finish this. So anyway, they're on a hayride, a bunch of kids and some adult with the horses, and all of a sudden, she said, this banshee came. I go, what's a banshee? And so that gets into the cryptoid. So there's some kind of wolf-like being, but it wasn't a wolf. It was bigger than a wolf. It was kind of snarly, and it's running after them, and the kids are screaming, and they're saying, get out of here, get out of here. So they had to run from this banshee. So, that was the first I heard about banshees. But when I went to a writer's conference, now I'm in my late 20s, early 30s, I go to this writers' conference, and it's in West Virginia, and they're talking about the banshees and all the different creatures in the hills of West Virginia. So that's another part that we can go into. But let me go back to her son, Larry, who's the seventh son of their seventh son. So he's telling me how he and his sister were sitting in the back of a wagon going south to visit Mom's family, wherever it was, in Carolinas or Virginia or something. And so they had a Ouija board. They were entertaining themselves in the back, and they got in touch with a ghost, and the ghost said, who are you? And he said, well, I died in the Civil War. And he said, I can't rest until you find my bones and bury them. So the kids told the mom and dad and the little brother, and so the whole family agreed to follow where this ghost study was, down a back road somewhere as they're being, going down the highway to go back to visit her folks. who were still alive at that time. So they followed the directions, and lo and behold, they found this dead Civil War soldier. They found his bones, and they dug a hole and they buried him. And then he was at peace. Okay, so I'm done with my story. Back to you, Ronnie.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've got another creepy story that really creeped me out here. I was probably in my 20s and working here in town, and we worked with a guy named Harley Casey, and he was a oil field worker, big, stout, rugged guy, no nonsense, no mess around, kind of guy you don't want to mess with. He's just big and stout and mean, and ain't afraid of nothing, you know. And he had these two twin daughters, and you know, I don't know how old they were. They were 6 or 7 years old, I think, and they were always talking about their invisible friend, you know, their invisible friend, always talking, chatting it up with them. And he's like, man, are these girls nuts? And they said, oh, don't worry about it. It's just a phase, you know, they'll grow out of it. And anyway, they were just always going on about their invisible friend. And they moved across town to another house here in town. It was a 2-story house, and he heard them talking, and they said, well, I said, dadgummit, their invisible friend came with us, you know, he went with us, you know, so I thought we were going to get rid of him, but no, I said, apparently he hung in there, and so they're always talking about their invisible friend, so he heard them making that racket up there, and he said went up the stairs, they're going to let him stay upstairs in the bedroom up there, so he heard it was time for bed, and he heard them making noise up there, and he's going to go up there and tell them it's time to turn the lights out and go to sleep. So he went walking up the stairs, and all of a sudden he looked over there, and he walked in the room, and they were talking it up, and the chair was rocking. And he said, what? And that chair, he said, looked and said that as soon as all of a sudden the chair just stopped. And he's like, oh my goodness! And then all of a sudden, all the two girls just looked at the same time out the window. And he said, oh, you scared him! You know, he went out the window. And he said, what went out there? He said, your invisible friend? He goes, yeah, he went out there. You scared him. He went out the window. And Arlie went over to the window, and he looked out of the window, and there was 2 red eyes outside the window looking back at him. And he said, man, he said, he seen those red eyes, and then all of a sudden they took off. You know, it was like something looked at him, turned, and took off. And he goes, man, he slammed that window down, locked that window, and he said the next day they were packing up. He said, we're getting out of here. He goes, we're not staying here. And he wasn't messing around. He moved out of that house. They just got moved in that house. And he said,
wow.
No, hell no. He said, no. He goes, when I seen that, he said, we're done here. And he packed his stuff up, and they moved out of that house. But the girls,
wow.
they had that friend for years, and they could see him, you know, when nobody else could. And
well, would the girls move with them? If that was their friend, the ghosts would just go with them. So you can't escape them when they're your friend like that, following you around.
Yeah, Arlie said, he goes, no, he goes, I'm out of here. He goes, this house is haunted. He goes, I'm not sticking around here. But the girls will tell you that. The house wasn't haunted. The girls were haunted. Yeah, the girls, they're adults now, and I still like to ask them from time to time. You know, they have a kind of a hard time remembering it. It's almost like they're blocking it out.
Oh, wow.
You know? And they said, yeah, I remember. Yeah, I remember. You know, that we'd seen him. We could see him. We could talk to him. He could talk to us. You know, he was our friend. You know, he played with us, and they were really had a good relationship with him. And man, but Arlie, it creeped him out. it creeped us out too, because we picked him up every day at work there. You know, it's like, and you know, we look at that window. There's nothing outside that window. I mean, it's a straight drop to the ground. There's no ledge or nothing that anybody could stand on. You know, he said those eyes were red, glowing red, and floating out there. And then it looked like it turned away from him and took off. Whatever it was, glowing red eyes.
Yeah. That'll freak out the straight people. Well, I got another one. I had a girlfriend that was living with me as a foster sister, I was the youngest of three, and my little brother and sister were gone, and we had a couple extra bedrooms, and she was having trouble with her stepfather, who was frankly trying to molest her. So she told me about it, and I said, well, let me talk to my parents, and my parents agreed to let her come live with us because my girlfriend's mom, I don't know what happened. She wasn't protecting her daughter. Let's just say that, and she didn't want to get a divorce from this guy, but she realized he was a creep. So it was like a win-win-win. So she moved in with me, and now there was that stairwell. I talked about the stairwell that went from the top room back to the kitchen. That was closed on both ends, the top and the bottom. It was locked. And my mother always said, do not ever open that door. And my mother could be a scary lady. We never wanted to sit by her. So I just said, no, I won't open it, Mom. I promise I won't open it. So my girlfriend, who did not have that same understanding with my mother, waited till my mother was at church and my father was at church. And I was sleeping because in the summer we would just stay up and go to bed at dawn. So it was around noon and I was still sleeping. And my parents were going to be in church till about 2 o'clock. So she gets out of bed and she goes down to the kitchen. Now, my mother had put a dryer in the kitchen blocking the door for the stairs. So she moved it out of the way. And so I'm up in bed while this is going on, sleeping. And I suddenly I wake up, I pulled up, right? And it wasn't a verbal scream, but I hear a psychic scream in my head, help, help, help. And it's Marion. And it was Marion. And I ran down, and the bathroom door was closed off the kitchen. And I ran over to the bathroom door, and she still wasn't verbally screaming, but I hear this psychic scream, and I said, what's going on? What's wrong? What's wrong? And she said, look. So all of a sudden I turned around behind me, and there was, I don't know if you remember Poltergeist, who that Steven Spielberg's Poltergeist, and it's that snarly beast that's like, and the door's open to the stairwell, which I had never seen the door open, and this beast is like snarling, and suddenly all this stuff in the room, like everything that was upside down, was spinning around in a vortex and flying around, spoons and glasses, and I just slid down all the way to the floor, and I'm just in a primal scream. I'm screaming because I can't believe, and I'm some kind of shocked. Now, 2.5 blocks away at the church is my mother and father, and my father is a deacon, so he was one that would teach people and help out. And my mother gets up and goes in the back room where the deacons would sit so they could help people coming in and out, so they could do it quietly. And she says, we have to leave right now. Now, my dad always obeyed my mother. My mother was the driving force of the family, so he instantly went and got the car. And my mother never learned to drive, so he drove her home. And he just pulls up to the house. She jumps off the car and runs up the steps, and she comes all the way in the back room. Now, here's this big thing zooming around, and somehow with her energy, her psychic energy, anyway, she takes this being and lashes it with her energy, so to speak, and pushes it back in the stairwell, and she slams it, and then she comes over, and I'm on the floor, and by that time, Marianne had opened the bathroom door, and she looks at both of us, and she said, I told you, kids, never open that door. That's the end of my story. Back to you.
I guess the ghosts don't like me telling my story. It kicked me off.
Well, let's do some UFO stories for a little while. Those are ghost stories. I mostly thought you were going to do UFO stories, so that's sort of why I tell people.
I just told a story. I just told a story. Did you hear me tell the story?
Yeah, I was here. Well, he didn't hear your story, but he can go back and record what he didn't hear.
It'll be didn't hear what I just said.
I did. I did.
Okay.
But hey, Ronnie, I know you've got a whole bunch of UFO stories about visiting out there, but tell the cow story, because I like that cow story. Janet hadn't heard it.
Ah, okay. Yeah, it was like I've been seeing a lot of lights and just mystery lights, stuff that's amazing, unexplainable lights moving about the trees, and you couldn't go out there on a Wednesday night, it seemed like, without seeing something. And I almost got to where I was looking forward to see what I was going to encounter on Wednesday nights. That was the first night I worked of the week. I'd usually work 2 or 3 nights depending on my schedule. But that Wednesday night, it was like I couldn't go out there without seeing some Wednesday night. So, and it was a Wednesday night, and I was just waiting to see what showed up this week. And I was cruising in my truck to get a load down south of I-20 over here in north central Texas. I was going south from Cisco, Texas, on the interstate down towards a little town called Rising Star, about 20 miles south. And I was headed down this long stretch of highway, and there was a lot of cars behind me. And all of a sudden, and I don't know why I didn't see it or notice it, but there was 6 huge lights way up in the sky over the road in front of me. I mean, I was like, what in the world is that? And where did that come from? It just showed up out of the blue. And I was looking to see if it was reflections off my glass. So I was sticking my head out of the window, and it was still there. And I was like, man. And I even seen a car pulled over like they were looking at it, and they were pointing at it. And I was like, man, I'm not the only one seeing it. There's people pulling off the highway looking at it. So I just kept cruising down the highway, and there was a lot of traffic on the road and a lot of cars behind me and stuff passing me. But as I got further down there's a big church down there, and it seemed like all the traffic turned off at the church. I guess it was just about church time or something. So everybody, all of a sudden the road went from pretty crowded to like nothing. It was like just, nobody on the road but me. And I'm cruising down this highway 183 south of Cisco, Texas, towards the little town of Rising Star, and looking at these big old 6 bright lights up there in the sky. Then all of a sudden 3 more decided to come on, and they wasn't like lights. There was like large areas of illumination. It was like illumination shining out of a huge opening, and these are gigantic openings. I mean, the openings seemed like they were big enough to fly a plane into, each one of them. And so these things, I mean, it was certainly unnatural, and I couldn't think of anything. Helicopters couldn't have a light that big on them, and I've seen helicopters flying to Dyess Air Force Base in Abilene before, and you could hear them from miles away, but it's easily identifiable as helicopters. But this was just odd looking, and there was dim lights when they were gigantic in size, and all of a sudden 9 of them finally had came on, and it stretched far across the highway. I mean, it looked like they stretched a mile across the sky down the road ahead of me. And I was like, what in the world could that be? And I just kept watching it, and all of a sudden 3 of the lights traveled together, broke off in a straight line, and they traveled down, descended to a field to my left out of my driver's side window. And they started descending. They didn't go all the way to the ground, but they stopped what seemed like, I don't know, maybe 100 yards in the air, 200 yards in the sky. And then I could see there's a blue beam shining out of it all the way to the ground. And it was a dark blue beam. It was just bright enough that you could see that it was some sort of beam coming out of it. And then all of a sudden, I looked out there on the ground, and there's a greenish yellow light glowing, and in this glowing light, I could see it looked like a person, but this person looked like it had like a bobblehead on it, huge head for the size for the skinny body, but it had like a huge head and this green glowing light around it. And I thought, my God, this is the strangest thing I've ever watched. And I'm looking around, trying to find a camera. I'm in a spare truck, and there's an accident camera in most of the trucks. But in this spare truck, I couldn't find the accident camera because I was trying to drive, trying to find the accident camera, and trying to watch all this going on at the same time. So I had a lot going on. And I couldn't. Finally, I realized that I went in this truck, and it's a spare truck, and so there wasn't no camera in the thing. I just gave up on being able to get a picture of it, and I just decided I'd watch it. And the thought of just I was getting close to where the thing was out in the field. It looked like it was about a quarter mile away out in the field. It was close enough that I could, I wouldn't ride upon it, but it was far enough away that I could see what was going on. And I could see there was a field, but there was a sparsely scattered trees out in the area, and I could see that not far from where the humanoid-looking thing was, there was a tree, and I could see the glow on the tree around this thing, and it was out in the field close to the tree, but it wasn't under the tree. And then I could see the blue light, and then I noticed that in the blue light, about 30 feet off the ground, there was something darker of the light, and it looked like it was moving, and I couldn't really tell what it was, but it was about 30 feet up, and then all of a sudden it came into focus. I guess maybe it spun around to where I got a better look at it, but it was a cow, and it was being lifted up about 30 feet up in the air, and it was whipping its head from side to side, and it wasn't straight up and down. Like if you'd have harpooned a cow or you had roped a cow and you'd picked it up, the weight of the carcass would like just make it almost like a teardrop. It wasn't like that. It was like the front end was lower than the back end, but the back end wasn't hanging perpendicular like it would if you had roped it or harpooned it or anything like that. It was floating up very odd. The head was down, and the cow was whipping its head from side to side. And when I seen that in that blue light, at that point I knew that I didn't have any business stopping and watching anything. I just really wanted to get the heck. And I looked up at the lights that was over me, and I couldn't see them. I don't think they disappeared. I think I drove under them. I thought I was underneath whatever it was, and you couldn't see the lights from there. I'd gotten into a position where the lights just couldn't be visible on that. I could still see the lights on the craft over the field that had the blue beam coming out of it, but the lights over my head, it was like I had to be underneath this thing. And I thought, man, if I hang around here, I'm going to be just like that cow. I'm going to be next on the list. And so, man, I just put my foot in it, and I just headed down the road, and I kept watching my mirrors and making sure that thing wasn't following me. And I'd seen everything I wanted to see for that night. And like I said, they asked, what happened to the cow? Do you see a carcass? No, I have no idea what happened to the cow. I don't know if it got returned, if it got taken, if it got mutilated. I have no idea what happened to the cow. Like I said, the next time I went down there was several days later. I didn't see any buzzards or anything like that down there. I have no idea what happened to the cow at ever. Whatsoever happened to the cow. And I filed a MUFON report, but I didn't. I had this friend. He said, "Do not tell them everything. They will never let you drive a truck again." So I reported it, and I got the date. And I reported seeing some lights and stuff like that, but it was a very edited MUFON report. There was no way I was going to put that I'd seen a cow getting lifted, in there, because I was like, no, that's not if I want to keep driving a hazmat truck. You don't want to be talking like that. That's not the guy my boss wants working for him driving a hazardous material truck. And so anytime I fill out a MUFON report, it's very edited down. To the point where I can look at it and people can tell that I seen something, just wasn't sure what it was, that kind of thing, and it helps me keep track of the date and the time and all that stuff. So that's what MUFON does. It's very good at cataloging UFO sightings, but I don't know if everybody's telling everything. I know in my case at that time it was very edited down. So
yeah, they like to separate what they choose to believe is real versus. Janet calls it the nuts and bolts, but I guess it's some of us oldies that started doing real investigations back in the day for the government and different organizations in the history of the UFOs. And it does, we had CUFOs too, but we had a lot of them before that. Jan Aldrich came on and did a series with me for several weeks, and the UFO Association on here. So listen to Jan Aldrich. He sort of shows the progression of how they went from the old days as a historian, and all the different UFO groups. But we've got UFO Association now. I want to rebuild it with the way it should be, with J. Allen Hynek and Stan and Dr. Bruce Maccabee and different Don Berliner, people like that, and then build up from there. That studied the Roswell forward. It was on the hour. We missed it, but Janet, are you going to stay with us the last hour or not? Yes or no? Do you know? Can you stay?
It just depends on when my workers come, but I'll be here as long as I can. And if I have to step away, I'll come back.
Okay, well, Ronnie, I don't mind producing this weekly and archiving it, folks. If y'all want to show up and tell your stories with Ronnie, you can be the big promoter and all that of You Ain't Gonna Believe This, because I told Ronnie that was a good name. Of course, we said the S word afterwards, because as truck drivers, we used to, when I'd go in all the truck stops, we'd sit around and entertain each other, and somebody would say that, but you got so used to it, depending on how well you knew the people, but a lot of new ones would break in the initiation over the road in the United States, at least the 8 years I was in, by people coming and sitting down that were new truck drivers. And then somebody would say, "You ain't going to believe this." It would say, cow dung, you know what I'm saying? And to see what would happen. And the young people would always look real curious. And we knew some truck story was going to come up, right? Like even the cow story, right? Or something. So that's how I talked to Ronnie about it, and he said, yeah, paranormal, but UFOs, and we could blend everything, couldn't we, Ronnie? Well, you did today with your ghost stories and stuff, and people will show up at our club, and hopefully we'll grow our club, folks. I'm trying to grow my authors club, and Janet writes books, and I write books, and Ronnie writes books, and we'll have a mention maybe on the hours in the future and stuff about that, but UFO stories, ghost stories, all that's good. Anything folklore, folk life, that kind of stuff. All right. Well, Janet says she'll stay a while. Ronnie, what you want to do now? Because we can tell whatever, I guess.
Well, I can tell. But part of there's an aspect of the it's right after the large craft Passover on March the 2nd, 2011. The one that I got pictures of and stuff, and the craft approached me and scared the hell out of me. There's an aspect to the story I don't get to talk about just because it takes so long to tell the story that this part of the story don't get included a lot. But it was like the third of the craft sightings that I had in a 1 hour period. The second one being the 1 mile mothership that flew right over the top of me. But after the mothership flew over me and had left, and it was time to leave the location. I had my truck loaded. And I was leaving the location, and I hadn't went 5 miles down the road. And there's a double wide trailer house out here. It's a farmhouse, and there's a farmer lives in it, and his land is all around him, plowed fields, all around him, and I'm going down the road, and I just seen all this stuff. So I'm, of course, I'm scanning the skies like crazy, trying to figure out where everything went, because I know they probably still out there. So I get to this double wide trailer house. Probably sits about 300 yards off the pavement. And I can't really drive my truck up to the house. But when I looked at the house, it looked like a dim star over the top of it, and I thought, man, that is not it. That looks way too close to be a star in the distance. And so I slowed the truck down, and I stopped at these people's driveway in my truck. And then I got my spotlight, and I started shining my spotlight at this star. Well, sure enough, this thing, it wasn't a star. It was something over the top of these people's double-wide trailer house. And it was probably maybe 100 feet above their house. And when I shined the light on this thing, I couldn't see a craft, but when I shined the light on this thing, it decided it was time to leave, and there's a triangle opening in the bottom of this thing, and it had round circular lights all along the triangle opening. Now the triangle opening on this thing was big enough that you could have put a Cessna airplane in it, and this is right over the top of these people's house. Now the craft was so dark that I couldn't see what the craft looked like, but I could literally stand there and look, and the lights, the round lights that was incorporated into the triangle opening on the bottom of it were bright enough that I could see the light inside the craft. I could actually see inside the craft, whatever the heck it was, and it had this most amazing array of plumbing network. It looked like the inside of a Porsche race car or something like that. It had turbo lines all over the wall. It and it spun into at one point it spun into a tight circle like a cochlea of the ear and the inner eardrum, and there was just all this stuff built right onto the walls of the craft. I mean, it wasn't anything. It absolutely looked alien. There was nothing. It hadn't looked like a human had touched any part of the inside of this thing, but it was lit up in there. I could look right up in there, and I could see the inside of the UFO. And, I mean, I didn't see a bunch of open rooms or anything like that. I couldn't see any rooms. All I could see was plumbing that was attached to the walls of the craft that almost looked like an internal, I don't know, like a living, like something living, like a rib cages, stuff like that looking stuff, man. It was just freaky looking. And I had my phone in my hand, and I was trying to get that thing to take a picture. The memory was plumb full. It was locked up. There was nothing I could do to get a picture. It would have been the best picture that I had taken out of the whole thing, because this thing just, I could hear it humming. It just slowly moved away from the house. It didn't take off quickly or nothing. There was a hum to the thing, and it just moved away, and I watched it the whole way until I couldn't see up in it anymore. But I was sitting right there looking up inside this UFO, and this thing was trying to disguise itself like it was a star in the distance. But when I was looking at it, and after seeing all those UFO and that mothership just fly over me, I was like, no, this is not, this is something right over the top of these people's house. And I didn't know these people from anything. I don't know who these people are, Never met them, don't know their names, but I had real concern over what the heck was happening to those people inside the house. I mean, they had a pickup outside their house that was running. It was running. It had the tail lights on. There was lights on the house. There was a porch light on. I mean, there was definitely somebody home, and they had no clue that there was a giant UFO right above the top of their house, and God only knows what it was doing. But I had a genuine concern for these people, what was going on. Later, I went back. This thing moved away, and I think it was a few days later, I went back up there, and I was in my personal vehicle, and I actually drove up to the house, and I showed the lady some of the pictures I had caught, and I told her the story about me stopping in their driveway and looking at their house. And the lady was really interested, and she was kind of freaked out a little bit. And she said, well, their grandmother used to live with them, and she used to always talk about the lights. She said the lights. And her bedroom window looked over the field. There's no road over there or anything. She said the lights came and see me again last night. She said the lights came right up to the window, And they said the woman told them that for years, and they just, thought she was nuts or something. They didn't really believe it. But after hearing my story, she goes, well, I wonder if that's what my mother was talking about. She used to talk about the lights would come across the field all the time and stop right at her window, And I was like, yeah, it may have been something too, because I showed her the pictures of what I seen over there. Amazingly, it seemed like they didn't live there much longer. Maybe they decided to leave or move somewhere else. But
wow.
That was pretty scary, seeing that right over the top of their house and wondering, what is it doing? What is it doing over these people's home? And they're oblivious to it. I don't know if they didn't. When I asked her, did anything weird happen, she goes, no, we don't remember anything weird happening or nothing like that. So they were just in their house doing what they thought they should be doing, and this giant UFOs placed itself right over the top of their home. And
I had a similar. Can you hear me? I lived at a state college, which is near Penn State University, in my second marriage, and I had a house that was built out in the middle of farm fields. So they were starting to move into farm country and build these little housing communities, and they'd be little cul-de-sac, and then they would go back out to the highway. So my house, there was nothing behind it but farm fields. And the same thing happened to me. I'm sound asleep in my bed. It's the middle of the night. There's nobody out there. There's no tractors. Nobody was doing anything. And these lights would come up, and they would come right up to the bedroom where I was sleeping with my husband at the time, and it would completely fill up the house. It was like it was brighter than a vehicle, right? But there's no road. There was nothing that could drive up to the house. you would see tracks or something. So same thing. So I wonder if there was something going on like what you were describing, but nobody was awake to witness it, or they had maybe zapped everybody so nobody was awake to, report what happened. But that happened several times. And then one time, I couldn't move. I was like paralyzed. And my husband, I could sense that he wasn't there, because you can, it wasn't a king bed, it was a queen bed. You could feel their body heat. And until I was awake, but I was frozen. I go, oh, he's not there. He's gone. What's going on? So I never did get clarity about what was actually going on, because of course they blank you out, and then you wake up the next day and it's like, oh my God. And that's me. So anyway, that's one of my stories. What about you, TJ? You had some weird things like coming into your house.
I had a double-wide trailer out in the woods, Ronnie, and a cedar house. It was really nice. It was my first home I bought with Tom out in the woods of Kentucky. But my neighbors, they were friends of ours, and they really wanted to buy a trailer and move down from us, so they did. And the older woman, she had grown up in the coal mines out there in it's Ohio County, Kentucky, around Beaver Dam and Hartford. And she told me about some Bigfoot stories, and I didn't believe her. But over the years, she took me out to way up in the where it was up above a Rosine, and there was where they would have coal, and they'd have a bell that'd ring. They'd usually just have like a little church, and the church would be where they taught school during the week. But anyway, this was way far away from there. But she moved it down from me, so she seemed to be okay, But she said over my house every morning she'd get up 4:30 to 5:30 to watch this UFO that just sit over the top of my double wide. And now you tell a story like that too. So that's sort of spooky, but she was spooking me out. But she didn't want to tell me for a while, and finally her kids dropped it to me. Of course, they were in their late 20s, and told me they weren't supposed to tell me because they were scared I'd scare them away or something. But she liked just getting up and watching the UFO, big old UFO over my house. And then finally the kids told me, so I went and asked her to talk to her about that. And so I went down and talked to her, and she admitted it. She said, yeah, I didn't want to say nothing because I was scared you'd scare them away or something. So that's all she said about it. But I said, well, are they doing anything, or can you see? She says, no, it just every day. She says, I get up and there it is. And I'm like, okay. So I didn't know what to, I know it sounds funny, but I didn't know what else to say. I mean, what can you say? Yeah, it's there. She doesn't know nothing about it, but she gets up to drink her coffee to watch the UFO. So anyway, but yeah, I've got lots of stories.
You were her entertainment.
Yeah, just over her house. She's passed now, but she's the same lady that told me about the Bigfoot out that would come listen to the fiddle music around the campfire when the coal miners would come in, and they didn't have very good excuse me, these were poor coal miners back in the day, right, in Ohio County, and they still one of my husband's excuse me, they were still coal mining when I left. They were blowing up the coal in 2016. Well, he died December 2015, but his relatives still worked at the coal mine, and they all knew how to handle dynamite and big equipment and all that. So it was quite an interesting life. But I did. The reason I asked about the Bigfoot, I was writing for the local newspaper at the time, and I would write interesting stories like we're talking about tonight, But I would collect them and work with the Smithsonian Institute in D.C. So today we're archiving. That's sort of how I got started doing that too, with the festivals. So, but the UFO stuff people didn't believe in around there, so we didn't much talk about that. But now what was funny is how they could talk. My husband, if I ever mentioned a UFO or anything, he'd pat my leg or not around his relatives because, they were church-going people, but they could believe in Bigfoot but not UFO. So
right.
telling me that Bigfoot would walk up, they'd hide behind the trees and stand behind the big, tall, like Sasquatch. But there'd be big, tall, shy creatures, she said. And, they could be dark black or brown or, she like they were just family. They had like a human face, but it was brown, cream. Colored people, they called them colored. The family was hairy colored people, but they didn't know Bigfoot till way later on. And my husband told me they started calling them Bigfoot, but she said they called them like hairy colored people. But it sounds like it back in the, they were talking 1900s, right? Up to the Depression, because she died late.
Right.
But a lot of those people talked about them, these people that they didn't have a name for other than hairy colored people, but real shy. But sometimes they didn't think they were natural to the planet. But so, coal-mining people born and lived there. Closest it goes maybe to a store with a wagon to buy some goods, or go to church on Sunday. They were hard-working people. So that was I started asking, and I had 2 or 3 people that had the same story from their grandparents. But the kids, I don't think, hung around much, or we got so urbanized that people didn't talk about it. You know what I mean? So that's something we can talk about, too, from time to time. But what else we got? UFO stories. I don't think Ronnie, do you know anything about me or Janet or stories of extraterrestrials?
It seems like I've heard you guys before, but I can't remember exactly what it was. But I've listened to some of your stories before. I know you're both experiencers, yeah.
I don't know how to change it.
That was one of the things that intrigued me about you guys, was I could come on here and talk about it, and you wouldn't just go, "Oh yeah," yeah, right.
Oh yeah,
that's
right.
true. I've done that. I've been on some shows where it was like, I think it was a Rob McConnell guy. I was on his show, and he was like, he refused to believe my UFO sighting because I didn't immediately call the police. It was like, if I would have really seen something, I would have called the police, and it just never occurred to me. I call the police when there's a crime being committed, but when I see a UFO, it doesn't occur to me to call the police, and I'm still kind of not sure whether someone should call the police or not.
No, that's a presupposition on their part. And people are people and perceptions. And I've worked with some of the most brilliant Mensa people on the planet, some of the richest multimillionaires on the planet, some of the smartest people, some of the dumbest people. And I've lived among, I lived in Kahala, next, in a mansion right with an ocean in Hawaii in my front yard, and I've lived in the poorest of poor places in a trailer as a truck driver up in the hills of Kentucky. So, by choice, and it's all been a choice depending on what level. And in each level, it's like the game of life, Ronnie. People are closed-minded a lot because they have created their own reality in the matrix based on their own experiences and their families, what they brought up in their cultures, and then their traditions, and anything you can think of that gives you the background of who each individual is. However, when you grow up in a community, you adopt their behavior, their intelligence quotient, and that's why now a lot of us that work in parapsychology and psychology and I guess all my friends pretty much are in metaphysics, but we understand the reality that changes constantly with each individual's intake, their database, right? What it is that they use their senses and perceive about themselves, not just who they are on the inside, but what is reflected from their inside onto others. So I've really learned a lot, especially from different groups. And it has to do with traveling the world, too, internationally, going to other countries and seeing how people live. And you really learn a lot. So the cultures are important, and that's why internationally we're really trying to do our best to, make America great again. But at the same time, we understand that the entire planet is spinning the same direction, and we're all like little fleas on a dog, So we have to forgive everybody if they don't accept our stories. But I'm sorry that happened to you, because a lot of these radio shows, most of us came from radio at some point in our lives, doing radio shows when the bigger companies are writing newspapers. But, everybody's got a different history. So for all y'all that do want to call in and join us every week, we'll be here to join them. But, Ronnie, you've got a good personality, so you will be the anchor for this show. And do you care if Tommy says something? He's been hanging on, but let him tell his Bigfoot story. Tommy, you want to tell your Bigfoot story in New Jersey?
My Bigfoot story? Yeah.
Yeah, tell him.
It.
Well, if you don't care, but yeah, tell your Bigfoot story so you'll be on here.
All right, well, mine was up in Wanacue, New Jersey. I work with a person named Sergeant 18, and we went up there like 4 days a week filming UFOs and all kinds of strange phenomena up there. But it was one day we stopped by the reservoir, which they flooded. They flooded a city there. It's the most important story in the UFO world, which nobody talks about. But the city was flooded, and it was up in Wanacue, New Jersey. And there's a lake there, and then they built this bridge that connected Jersey to New York State. So we were up there. We got there early, so we stopped by this bridge, and we pulled over. And he wanted to do a few things. I said, well, let me just take a short walk. When we go out, we have like 2 cameras, two flashlights. I walk with a staff and a knife when we go out, and we usually load up before we start walking on the land. But I said, well, let me just take a short walk up the road. I got halfway up the road, and I heard this squeaking sound. I don't know if you're familiar with much about the Montauk Project, what they released and what happened, but the story was they called it the Hershey monkey. So I thought it was that. So I'm walking through the woods, and I pull into the weeds, and I start going in between the trees and everything. And then all of a sudden, it's just dead silence, and I just said, uh-oh. And then I felt breathing down my back. So I slowly turned my head. The moon was out. It was about 9:30 at night. The moon was out, and it was really bright out. As I turned around, it was a Bigfoot about a foot away from me, standing above me, looking down at me. I reached for my camera, realizing I didn't have my camera. I didn't have my staff in my hand. I didn't have nothing. So I started running back to the truck, screaming to the 2 people. I had a scientist in the truck, Bruce Cornett, and Sergeant 18 in the truck. And I'm screaming, get the cameras. Because I thought sure it was running, because it stamped on a log, and it just snapped this log right in half. So I'm running all the way back to the truck. I get back to the truck. Neither one of them were moving. They had the doors locked. I said, open the door, get the cameras. Neither one of them would open the door. And I'm saying, come on, there's something over there. Finally, the Sergeant 18 rolls the window down just a little. He goes, what did you see? I said, there's a Bigfoot there, come on. And he goes, no, I don't deal with those kind of things. I only deal with aliens. And I said, well, they're aliens just as much as anything else is. But finally, 5 minutes later, now Bruce Cornett's a scientist, and he's got all these degrees, and he's just sitting there frozen solid. He won't move. So I open the door, and I step out. I get him to come out. And then it's still dead silence. And he goes, what'd you see? I said, it was a giant Bigfoot standing right next to me. Then all of a sudden it started howling. We've been on these mountains for 3 years. We never heard a Bigfoot scream. We never heard a wolf howl, ever, in the 3 years that we were up there. And we were up there almost every day, at least 3 or 4 days a week. Winter snow, in the summer, no matter what. So now, all of a sudden, we hear this howling. I mean, all the shows that portray a Bigfoot screaming, it's exactly how it sounds. I'd say a cross between a baby scream and like a big animal scream put together. And it was going on for about 5 minutes. It would happen every 30 seconds. It would scream real loud. And then all of a sudden it stopped to a dead silence again. And I said, what happened? All of a sudden, at that point, which is actually about 10 minutes, 15 minutes after I saw it, all the wolves from all parts of the mountain were howling. I mean, like I said, we were there many days, night, or half of the night, and we never heard a wolf howl. All of them were howling around the different mountains. And I only found out not too long ago that there's the stories of the wolves that follow the Bigfoot. Whether they go after the food it eats, I have no clue. I mean, I never figured that part out. But it was just bizarre because now the scream stopped, and then like these wolves are howling, and it echoed around the whole mountain. And then within 5 minutes that stopped, and it was back to dead silence. But what was really outrageous about that whole thing, the next morning, we wanted to go up there to see if there was any kind of footprints or anything. And I saw what they call, I call it the Hershey monkey. I don't know what it was, but it was little, and it was running through the weeds, and I started chasing it, and it jumped right into a tree, not into a hole in the tree, it just jumped right into the tree, and then it was gone. But at that point, I started trekking. I was friends with a couple people involved with the Montauk Project, and they said, well, that one of the few of the creatures that escaped, one was on Long Island, one was got off in New Jersey somehow, and they were talking about the different creatures that got out of there. But the whole thing, like at that night, lasted about 15 minutes. But I never got a picture of it. The next day we went out there, we couldn't find any kind of tracks because it was really lots of trees down and all kinds of stuff, so it's not like a place where you would see a footprint. But the following night, we went to where Tesla was working with DuPont, and I don't want to get into the stories too much because I don't want everybody to think I'm that crazy, but when we went out there, we heard these screams in the air. And at that point, we had our cameras out. We couldn't see anything. And picture just like any movie you ever saw of a flying bird creature, the screeching sound that it would make. There was 5 of us there, and we heard it coming over our head real loud. And you could feel the energy from the wings flapping, like that. And it was echoing through the ground. We still didn't see anything. I mean, like I said, at that point, the moon was still out, and there was I couldn't see it, the shadow of it or anything. And then all of a sudden, we hear a crash, and all these rocks started falling down the mountain. So we decided to leave that night. And then the following day, which is actually the 3rd day, we went back there. We had 2 footprints of the bird landing on the ground, and we got pictures of that. I mean, whether it was a visible or invisible creature, whatever was flying there, we heard it, we saw it. There was like 5 of us there altogether. But it really kind of changed our viewpoint of what was up there. But this is where Tesla worked, and Tesla was doing all his work with DuPont. And they flooded a city there. That's when they put the Wanacue Reservoir in. During that time frame, and this is what nobody talks about, for 6.5 to 8 months, the Army was stationed around the reservoir because the ships were just flying in and out of the reservoir, whether it was frozen or not. And after about 7 months, the Army just left. But you never heard a story about it. I mean, there were a couple people that tried to get the information about it. From that point on, we were more concerned about that story. This Sergeant 18 and we go where he saw his first UFO land up in Wanacue. And we just went up there many years. I don't want to keep going, but it was just so many things happened after that point. But it was kind of like an interesting moment. It was the only time I decided to run back to the truck to get a camera. I mean, I kind of should have just stayed there and tried to communicate with the thing, but I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I mean, if I would have had my camera, I would have stayed there. If I would have had anything else on me, I would have. But without it, I said, I can't even prove this. So I figured it would chase me back to the truck, which it didn't. But that was my one night with the UFO and the Bigfoot within like 3 days. So it was pretty intense. But I'll cut it off there.
All right. Well, Janet lives in Pennsylvania. Janet, would you like to? I've got a new show starting Tuesday, folks, for cryptids, and with Lon Strickler. He's had the Pause for Paranormal or something. He has monsters and something else, but he'll be on Tuesday. But Janet, you want to talk about your Pennsylvania flying something that would sort of go with today? Did you see it, or your brother did?
There's a lot of Pennsylvania stories. What about
the flying with the red eyes on the bridge? What's it called, Tommy?
That was the, oh, God. Let me get
It goes with Tommy's story.
Wait a minute, stop. I can't think until you stop talking. It was the one that came in from West Virginia. Oh, God. I got to look it up. The one with the wings. Anyway, there was one back in the 60s that was flying around West Virginia, and a bridge collapsed in West Virginia because of this creature that was flying around. I got to get the name of the creature. Come on. Hold on, let me get this. Mothman, the Mothman. Okay.
That's it.
Yeah, and I was tracking this down. My brother has a friend who who called the police about the Mothman. Okay, so we're in the live in a little town called Avalon, which is next to Bellevue, which is in Pittsburgh, down the river, heading down to Ohio, and so we get wind of that there was some kind of creature flying around, and later it was called the Mothman. And my brother's closest friend had called the police, and it ended up getting around the neighborhood really fast. So all those kids, everybody, all ages, ran down to the park, and we were all gathered, and they were all running around the park, sharing stories. There was a bunch of people that had encountered it and saw it, and then the newspapers came down. They took pictures of it, and then years later, I was thinking back on that day, and I go, was that my imagination? Was there really a flying creature with red eyes? But then the book came out, the movies came out. So my brother's friend, he had been in prison for a couple of years. He got out, and he said, I got to tell this story. And he had written down like a whole blow-by-blow accounting of this Mothman. That was so. What happened was it was really tall, and it had like a mechanic. I need to reread it. It was really a detailed, like 9-page account of this creature, and so they ran up to the shelter house in Avalon. There's only one shelter house, and it's been there since the 1920s or something. And there's a farm behind the shelter house back in the. So anyway, this accounting was he ran up they ran up after the creatures. There were 2 or 3 of them. They were walking. They were about 12 feet tall or something. They went back to the stop sign where they saw how they were. So they measured the stop sign. It was like they were little investigative reporters, but they weren't afraid. They were like chasing after these creatures, and then the creatures saw them chasing them, so they ducked behind a dirt pile. Somebody was digging a hole, I guess, put some pipes in. They ducked behind it, walked past. It was really high drama. And I was tracking it down with my brother, and his friend got scared to tell the story and to come out and put his name to it. And I said, well, we'll just do it anonymously. So I knew they were going to track it down again. But it's really interesting. You think that you're the only one, but here I am. That was 65 or something, 66. And here comes another witness. So I'll have to track that down. Thanks for reminding me about that. I got to write to my brother and say, hey, did you get permission to release the story? I think I have my computer send it to me, and we can always change the name. He had the name of the cop that came down. He had pictures of the article that was in the paper. All the very detailed, and this is like a, 18 or 19-year-old person that had enough foresight to document it. So I'll let you know. I'll look for that for you, Ronnie. That was appropriate for your show here.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a Bigfoot story, but I'm going to save it for next week because it takes a while to tell it.
Okay.
And
well, I can tell one about a craft that came, tree height, and maybe you have another one, TJ. So I was coming home. It was 1966. I'm 12 years old. I don't really have a curfew, but I go home because everybody's going home, right? And the crickets are out, and so it must be August because the crickets don't really come out till the end of summer, and they come out really loud when it's hot in the East Coast, from what I remember. And so all of a sudden, I felt something in the back of my head, and I turned around and I looked over towards my best friend at that time. Her name was Patty, when I looked over, she's the lights on, so she was home, and my eyes drawn to the treetop, and there's a giant, what do you call it, cigar-shaped craft, and it has all the windows. And so I'm looking up into the cigar-shaped craft, and I can see their figures, and they're staring out of the craft at me. And, you know, they have different shaped heads, you know. Looks like they were kind of like grays, but, you know, it's still too far for me to see any great detail, but I could definitely see it was lit, and there were creatures or beings or somebody staring at me. At first I said, was that the lip? Like, no, it's shaped, it's cigar-shaped, not lip shaped. But the other thing that happened was all the traffic stopped. Now, I lived in a somewhat busy street. It was a little side leg of the bus. So the bus would come down one of the last journeys of the night, and there were cars that come down the hill. And so the whole time I was looking at this, not a single car came by, but the cricket stopped cricketing. I went, whoa. It was almost like a barometer shift or a dimensional shift. I could feel the vibe of the whole energy of the world where I was standing shifted, and they just didn't go away. And I got relaxed about it. You know, it's kind of caught off guard, and I relaxed, and I just started sending thoughts to them. And I didn't get I've often had telepathy, but I didn't get any strong words or impressions. It was just like a really sweet, loving energy. There was no fear whatsoever, no anxiety. And I stared at them a while, and I said, you know, I'm getting tired. I really thank you for visiting with me and for showing yourself to me. But I got to go in. I'm getting tired. And it was starting to get chilly because when the sun goes down after a couple hours, it's chilly. So it was probably around 9:30. You know, it started to get chilly. Anyway, then years later, I found out that was, you know, the Dracos apparently like the cigar-shaped craft. Not sure, but the beings I saw were more like gray beings, but slightly different. And then I was researching Betty and Barney Hill's encounter, and I saw the rendition of their craft, and I go, oh, that's very close to what I saw. It wasn't exact. So anyway, maybe somebody will do an analysis of all the different craft and all the sightings and all the different beings for all the years. But that was, I was so happy. I just went to bed going, oh my God, I'd like you, Ronnie, just so happy that you see them.
Yeah, just to see them. Ronnie, I can mention the Allied Council. I worked with my husband, and he and we met. We don't know. We were scared of each other. We had worked as agents for the government out of country, but the Allied High Council somehow brought us together, and they're intelligent beings. And now they told us they represent all the peaceful galaxies. They formed an alliance for positive intelligence beings, and they do good in not only the galaxies here in this universe, but others. And we were able, Janet calls it the space, well, we call it UFO Secret Space right now on Facebook, and we each have a UFO Secret Space domain name we bought, so we could try to make heads or tails of this. But, you know, whether people believe in gods or extraterrestrials or angels or messengers, Tommy fell off, or I guess he left, but anyway, gets close to the end of the show. But the Allied Council, you know, it doesn't really, for a while when I was writing and I introduced mine and Tom's story, I had talked to AIM out in California, and the movie Contact had come out. I'd already gone to Roswell and met with Glenn Dennis that got the little coffins for the aliens, and heard his story about the nurse. And then Lawrence Spencer Janet had him come on, and I got to read his book. He writes for Lulu like I do. And my story was similar, but Janet remembered one of the days that she got me to open up a little bit about stuff I didn't want to. And I got, because she said, how are you doing this? It was like I was remote viewing my past life as Errol. And then, lo and behold, Lawrence called her AIRL, and my memory was Ariel. And I had told Janet about Ariel before we heard about Errol. So she was saying, no, it's like Ariel. You know, he writes it, but Errol. But she saw the similarities, and she had known my story from being on her radio show and talking one day. I don't think somebody showed up for her show, but she didn't let me be on very many Aquarian radio shows in 8 years. So it was for the third time she had me on, and I was ducked down behind something. I was ducked down and shy, and they pulled up all the police officer, not the police, the army, and it was terrible. But she asked me how I knew. I said, well, because I was there. But I was remote viewing a past life. So that goes with our consciousness thing that I really seriously want to talk with Janet, Tommy, and you too, because everybody has their own opinion. And everybody thinks they're right because it's in their head and they experienced it or they've been told that. But we're hoping to work universally now, because I know that God, to me, is everything. And I know if I didn't make it, you can call it God or higher power or source or all that is or the Big Bang. I don't care. But I do believe in the way I was raised in my tradition, so I choose to believe in a all-seeing, all-knowing. But at the same time, the way that some of the scientists have been training me in YouTubes, they drop it down. Now, I work with a lot of quantum physicists, always did work with scientists in the government, so I understand the quantum physics scientific point of view. But I did write the ACE Guide, so if anybody does care to hear my story, it's ACE Guide by T.J. Thurman Morris, and I think it's on Lulu. But it's got in there the story of my husband and the Allied Council, and a lot to do with how it changed with the world religions, because the Catholic Church responded automatically. And I got to see the numbers that were in the millions on because at that time they didn't block all of the people that tracked you on in the back ends, and I could see all the countries, Russia, China. You still can, but not as much. But back in that day, in 2007, because I was a web developer with GoDaddy, I could see all the back end. I had American News Magazine. I was writing for American Chronicle, but it blew the world open with that story I was telling on UFO Digest and with Dirk in Canada. And then the Catholic Church got involved. And if you can go back and track this timeline, folks, but it was a huge deal because I was talking about NASA, my husband working at NASA and hearing bogey 12 o'clock or 4 o'clock or whatever it was. I don't remember now. But all the stories, because I was making it real about the Allied Council, because my husband and I scared each other to death knowing the same story. Just like today, you know, I had Tommy talk about the Bigfoot because I did, and also Janet talk about the Mothman because Tommy talked about that big flying thing, right? So, Ronnie, I don't know what we're going to expose here, but you know, you ain't going to believe this. I guess it's saying in the title, we don't care whether they believe it or not. Well, we can tell our stories and hope that people will want to listen. But I swear to you that there's stories I've got that have not been written. But in this ACE Guide, I was shocked. I found it today. It had forgotten I wrote it 2007 to 2011, before 2012. And the Allied Council had pretty much convinced me that by 2012, all these people, I was having to tell everybody in writing and being a big influence on the internet, that the world wasn't going to come to an end. So I was doing my part, you know. A lot of people were, but I did my part. But the Allied Council, now they told me about the E.T. Grays and how they lost their planet, you know, in another galaxy. but we can't hardly get light years in this galaxy. So I'd like people to know that a lot of these people that talk interplanetary or intergalaxy, that's one level, but we also call it interstellar, and then I've talked about the big ships that we use at the higher level, and I'm on record now because my daughter that died filmed me talking about it in an event we had here in Navarre Conference Center. So I have about a 15-minute introduction, Ronnie, on that. So we may be able, now that it's 2020 and got through this other side, be able to talk about some of our reality, although if we present it like this, it don't matter if people believe us or not, because I don't know how else to tell the truth.
Right. Yeah, we can't control what people believe, but they got a right to hear it.
Yeah, I agree. It's really not important what they believe or not, but telling the tale, getting it out there. So I'm proud of you, TJ, starting to speak up. It's really hard. We started this whole show with how hard it is for some people to say it, because there's always public ridicule and shaming and blaming, and that's a hard thing to face. We, as human beings, we rely upon approval of others, and disapproval or approval affects our own self-esteem, and that's kind of what we are. We're not solitary beasts. We're social beings, and we tend to rely a lot upon, getting approval. But as we get older and more mature, we just go, I don't really care what they think. Because I can't live my life based on what other people think of me or believe. I have to just be authentic and be who I am. So I think we've come a long way. So I'm really happy that we're authentically expressing, and I encourage other people that have stories to tune in and start being real with yourself in your own life and speaking your personal truth. So that's my 2 cents. I think we're almost out of time. I don't know if anybody's listening to me or not. Did we fall off?
No, we're like 3 minutes. 3 minutes.
Go ahead. It's all yours, Ronnie. Take us on home. What would you like to tell everybody?
We hope you guys enjoyed our episode today. You ain't gonna believe this, because we're gonna tell you some stuff that's gonna be hard for you to believe, and it might scare you a little bit too. Some of the weird stuff that we covered tonight. But we're gonna be here every Saturday, probably 7 p.m. Maybe some days we may be 3 p.m. But I think next week it's probably gonna be 7 p.m. But we encourage you to, if you want to call in, feel free to call in and tell us what some of your paranormal stories, or if you have a story that you're too shy to share, you can email it to me, RonnieDawson11@gmail.com, RonnieDawson11@gmail.com, and I'd be happy to share it for you. So next week, I've got a Bigfoot story next week, and we'll talk about it, and we'll talk about some more paranormal madness, and we hope you really enjoy the show. We've had a good time putting it on. And like I said, there's just so much stuff out there, and so many people to share it. And I enjoy hearing stuff that, because if you don't share it, eventually someday you're going to die. Nobody will ever. It'll be the end of the story. The story can live forever if you're willing to share it. So don't let the story die. Don't let something that amazing die with you. So. And that's the reason, like I said, some of the stories I've told tonight are from the stories of my dad, who's no longer here. So, the story lives on through me and to the ones I tell it to. So, we encourage you to call in, and we hope you enjoy the show. And I thank everybody. Thank TJ and Janet for coming in here, and I enjoy everybody that came in and shared their stories as well. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to say before we close it out?
I think that's all for me. TJ, do you have any exit music that we can close the show with? We got something nice to play, and we can. Anyway, TJ might not be there. Anyway, I think we're pretty complete. I really appreciate everybody coming. Thank you so much. And TJ, would you like to say the final word, and then we will say goodbye? So I'm going to say aloha, everybody, and thank you for joining us. And this has been the my show is Aquarian Radio, and TJ's is TJ Morrison's Radio, and this show is part of a series called You Ain't Gonna Believe This. All righty, I'm going to go now. Thank you. Much love and blessings, and aloha.
Good night.